The room froze the moment laughter cut through the music, sharp and careless, like a glass shattering on marble. It wasn't the kind of laughter that came from joy, but from entitlement, from someone who had never been told no. At the center of it stood a young, wealthy man in a tailored suit, his smile smug as his eyes swept over a woman he had just dismissed as irrelevant. No one in that glittering hall realized that within minutes, fortunes would shift, power would reverse, and a deal worth $650 million would vanish as easily as the respect he had just thrown away. If you believe that kindness still matters in a world obsessed with status, if you believe that arrogance always comes with a price, take a moment now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us what truly defines success. The party was meant to be unforgettable, and it was, though not for the reasons anyone expected. It was hosted in one of the most exclusive penthouses overlooking the city skyline, where glass walls revealed a sea of lights below, each one representing a life, a dream, a struggle. The guests were dressed in luxury, moving through the space with champagne flutes and practiced smiles, speaking the language of money and power as if it were their native tongue. For many, this was just another evening of networking, another chance to be seen. For her, it was supposed to be a quiet appearance, nothing more than a courtesy. She arrived without spectacle, no entourage trailing behind her, no dramatic entrance. She wore a simple yet elegant dress, dark and understated, the kind chosen by someone who didn't need to announce themselves to feel important. Her hair was neatly styled, her posture calm and assured, and her eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen both the bottom and the top of the world. To most people in the room, she was invisible. And she was used to that. Years earlier, she had learned that true power didn't shout. It listened, it observed, it waited. Her name was Elena Marquez, though few recognized it at first. She had built her company from a cramped apartment with faulty heating and a second-hand laptop that crashed every few hours. There were nights she slept on the floor beside her desk because going home felt like a waste of time. There were mornings she cried in silence before meetings where men twice her age told her she was too young, too emotional, too ambitious. She had been laughed out of boardrooms, ignored by investors, and once mistaken for an assistant while pitching a multi-million-dollar idea. Each humiliation carved something into her, not bitterness but resolve. The company she now led was one of the fastest-growing tech infrastructure firms in the region, a silent giant powering systems people relied on daily without ever knowing her name. And tonight, she was there because her firm was on the verge of finalizing a $650 million strategic partnership with a legacy conglomerate owned by one of the richest families in the country. That family's heir was also at the party. He was impossible to miss. Tall, confident, surrounded by admirers, he moved through the room as if it were built for him alone. His name was Julian Ashcroft, and wealth had been woven into his identity since birth. He had never worried about rent, never doubted his future, never questioned his place in the world. Success, to him, was inherited, not earned. And people treated him accordingly, laughing at his jokes, nodding at his opinions, feeding the illusion that he was extraordinary simply for existing. When his eyes finally landed on Elena, it wasn't curiosity that sparked his interest. It was amusement. She stood near a corner, speaking politely with a mid-level executive, her body language open yet reserved. Julian drifted closer, drawn by the unfamiliar sense that she didn't seem impressed by him. He interrupted the conversation effortlessly, barely acknowledging the other person before turning his attention to her. His gaze traveled over her outfit, not leering, but assessing, as if she were a detail to be catalogued. He asked her what she did, his tone casual, almost bored. She answered calmly, mentioning her role as CEO without emphasis, as if it were just another job title. The word barely registered with him. He smirked, assuming it was either an exaggeration or a small, insignificant company. In his world, CEO meant something only when attached to a recognizable empire, preferably one founded generations ago. What followed was a moment that would be replayed in Elena's mind many times later, not because it hurt, but because of how revealing it was. Julian laughed, not loudly, but enough to draw attention. He made a dismissive remark about how everyone at these events liked to pretend they were important. He suggested she enjoy the free drinks and leave the real business to people who understood it. His words were smooth, wrapped in charm, but the message was clear. She was being put in her place. Around them, a few people chuckled nervously, unsure whether to join in or look away. Others pretended not to notice, their silence louder than laughter. Humiliation has a way of spreading quietly, and in that moment, Elena felt its familiar weight pressing against her chest. But she did not react. She didn't raise her voice or defend herself. She didn't explain who she was or what she had built. Instead, she met his gaze with a calm so steady it unsettled him, and simply nodded. She thanked him for his advice and stepped away, leaving him standing there with his smirk slowly fading into confusion. Julian shrugged it off, already turning to the next conversation, convinced the interaction was meaningless. To him, it was just another fleeting moment of superiority. To her, it was clarity. Elena moved toward the balcony, the cool night air a relief against the heat of the room. Below, the city pulsed with life, indifferent to the dramas unfolding above it. She rested her hands on the railing and allowed herself a single deep breath. Not of anger, but of decision. In her mind, pieces began to align. The partnership, the conditions, the behavior she had just witnessed. She thought of her employees, the people who trusted her leadership, the culture she had fought to build. Respect was not a perk in her company, it was a requirement. And any alliance that compromised that was not worth the money attached to it. She reached into her clutch and took out her phone. While the party continued inside, while Julian basked in attention and praise, Elena sent a message to her legal team. It was brief and precise. She instructed them to prepare a formal withdrawal from the deal, effective immediately. No negotiations, no second chances. The response came quickly, surprised but trusting. They knew her well enough not to question decisions made with such calm certainty. By the time she returned inside, the deal was already unraveling. Word travels fast in rooms filled with power. Within minutes, executives began checking their phones, murmurs spreading like ripples in water. Confusion replaced confidence. Julian noticed the shift, his laughter faltering as people excused themselves from conversations, their faces tense. A senior board member approached him, his expression strained, and pulled him aside. The conversation was hushed, but Julian's posture stiffened, his brows knitting together. He glanced around the room, his eyes landing on Elena just as she was preparing to leave. For the first time that evening, he saw her clearly. He was told the deal had been cancelled. Not postponed, not renegotiated, cancelled. $650 million gone in an instant. The reason given was simple and devastating. Cultural misalignment, lack of mutual respect. Julian felt the ground shift beneath him. He tried to laugh it off, to assert that there must be some mistake, but the looks he received told him otherwise. This was real, and it was serious. Panic crept in, unfamiliar and unwelcome. He excused himself and hurried toward Elena, catching up to her near the exit. His confidence had evaporated, replaced by urgency. He called out to her, his voice suddenly polite, almost pleading. She turned, her expression unreadable. He attempted an apology, clumsy and rushed, blaming misunderstandings, stress, anything but himself. He spoke of the importance of the partnership, of how much was at stake, of how words could be misinterpreted. For the first time, he was trying to convince someone who didn't need him. Elena listened without interrupting. When he finished, she responded quietly, her tone steady. She explained that she didn't cancel the deal because of one comment. She canceled it because his comment revealed something deeper. A lack of respect not just for her, but for anyone he deemed beneath him. She told him that no amount of money justified aligning her company with values she couldn't stand behind. She wished him well and turned to leave. There was nothing more to say. As she stepped into the elevator, the doors closing softly, Julian stood frozen, surrounded by wealth and influence that suddenly felt fragile. For the first time in his life, he faced the consequences of his arrogance, and there was no one else to blame. The story didn't end that night. In the weeks that followed, news of the canceled deal spread through the industry. Speculation ran wild, but the truth eventually surfaced. Quietly, respectfully, Elena's decision was praised by those who understood what leadership truly meant. Her company's reputation soared, not just for its innovation, but for its integrity. Employees felt proud to work under someone who stood up for values, even at great financial risk. Investors took notice, drawn to the strength of a leader who refused to compromise. Opportunities emerged from unexpected places, partnerships with organizations that shared her vision and respect. As for Julian, the loss forced a reckoning. The family empire weathered the blow, but his standing within it shifted. He was no longer the untouchable heir, but a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. Slowly, painfully, he began to learn lessons no amount of inherited wealth could teach. Months later, at a different event, in a different room, Elena was invited to speak. She stood on a stage, the city lights once again behind her, and spoke about leadership, resilience, and the quiet power of self-respect. She didn't mention the party or the deal. She didn't need to. Her presence alone told the story. If this journey of strength, dignity, and quiet courage has moved you in any way, take a moment now to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep stories like this alive. Before this story ends, I invite you to comment one word that describes how it made you feel. Your words matter more than you know. Elena left the stage to a standing ovation, not because she had won a battle of egos, but because she had chosen herself when it mattered most. And in a world that often rewards cruelty and arrogance, her story became a reminder that true success isn't measured in dollars, but in the courage to walk away with your dignity intact.